Welcome, brothers. And some sisters. We're glad to have you here with us tonight. I'm John Ball from St. Mary's, Maryland, and down south of Washington, D.C. And we're delighted to have you here, and we are delighted, Father Boyle, to have you here as well to speak to us tonight as part of our watering hole. And I'd like to start with a prayer of awareness by John Philip Newell. It's in his prayer book, Praying with the Earth. And it goes like this. Not because we have made peace this day, not because we've treated the other as ourself, not because we have walked the earth with reverence today, but because there's mercy, because there's grace, because your spirit has not been taken from us. We come, still thirsting for peace and longing to love, still hungering for wholeness. Amen. So I'd like to start again by welcoming you, Father Boyle, and by way of introduction, Father Greg Boyle, affectionately known as G to a number of folks, is the founder and director of Homeboy Industries. It is an organization that ministers to one of the poorest communities with the largest concentration of gangs in Los Angeles. And Father Boyle and his staff have helped thousands of gang members to discover their true selves by offering hope and unconditional love. And these former gang members and men and women who have been incarcerated are people who become whole by discovering and claiming their self-worth, their belovedness, and their sense of kinship. And this happens through counseling and job training and employment, and helps them to grow into confident, productive adults and citizens. And Father Boyle is the author of several excellent books, most of which are rooted in storytelling: Tattoos on the Heart, The Power of Boundless Compassion; Barking to the Choir, The Power of Radical Kinship; and The Whole Language, The Power of Extravagant Tenderness; and then Forgive Everyone Everything. And so we will begin our conversation with a few questions. Greg, could you just tell us a little something about yourself? Just you personally.
Oh, I don't know. I'm a native Angelino. I have 5 sisters and 2 brothers, and my parents, my dad died about 30 years ago. My mom died, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. And I've been a Jesuit for 50 years.
50.
Yeah, and I was ordained in 1984. So I've been pretty much here in Boyle Heights, living here anyway, for 40 years. Whereas, Homeboy was born in the projects where I was pastor. It now serves the whole county of Los Angeles that has 120,000 gang members and 1,100 gangs. So
Wow.
we're in our 4th location, our headquarters in Chinatown. So we serve the whole county.
So how were you called to this particular work of transformation, and what keeps you going?
Well,
a long time.
I didn't feel, particularly called to anything. I mean, I was the pastor of a very poor parish. I spoke Spanish, and we had 8 gangs at war with each other. So they were my parishioners. And I was bearing kids starting in 1988. So we just responded to things, and, just it evolved. Nobody sets out to do anything, I don't think, but, I just backed my way into finding this kind of vocation within a vocation within a vocation.
What keeps you going?
Well, I I think whenever you find your true self in loving, when you let love live through you, um, that keeps you going. So you're delighting in the people in front of you. You're standing in awe at what they have to carry rather than in judgment.
Yes.
So those things are eternally replenishing. And
How do you experience God's presence in that work?
well, I think the incarnation is really, certainly not about sin. It's about God wanting to be tender. And so you find in the tenderness of people, especially folks on the margins who have to carry so much and whose dignity has been denied and whose burdens are more than they can bear, you find, you allow yourself to be reached by them, and you let your heart be altered by them. And so then there's no depletion at all, because it's all exquisitely mutual. Everybody is inhabiting their own nobility and dignity in each other's presence. So it's exquisitely mutual.
And I assume that one of the things that keeps you grounded and focused and continuing in your work is your prayer life. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, part of it is, you stay connected to the ground of your being and to the generosity of God. And so it doesn't, it's not exactly a ground you stand on, but it's an ocean you float in. And so, your practice, takes a wide variety of kind of forms, sitting with a candle lit, or walking, as I try to do every morning for an hour. And so, your practice doesn't make perfect, but it makes permanent. And so you somehow, your intentionality is not to live one day at a time. As the homies will in recovery, I always say, it's more about one breath at a time. And so you want to connect it to your breathing, so you want to cherish with every breath. And cherishing is not hard, but remembering to cherish is really difficult. So you want to somehow, make it part of the air, literally the air you breathe. So we always think everything is kind of once and for all, and obviously it's not. And sometimes you think, well, I pray in the morning, I'm good to go, like you're some electronic car that you plug in. And that's not true either. So it's hard to do, but that's where the joy is that no one can take from you.
Yeah, my first spiritual director was a Trappist monk from the monastery in Berryville, Virginia. His name was Father Stephen Yasinovitz, now of blessed memory. And he described that kind of thing that you're talking about, that kind of prayer, as a means of surrendering to the gift of the present moment and being in that moment prayerfully each and every breath.
Yeah, because you're always being drawn to the thing that keeps you stuck in sadness, which is self-absorption. Mm-hmm. And so I suppose it begins as trying to be other-centered, but it finds its fullest kind of manifestation in being loving-centered. Mm-hmm. And so that's where you want to be. It's a little bit like service, begin with service. That's perfectly fine. But then service is the hallway that gets you to the ballroom. You want to get to the ballroom, which is kinship and connection and a place of cherished belonging. In the same way, you want to kind of begin with maybe thinking about someone other than yourself. And then pretty soon it can, if that becomes your intention, you can find yourself really anchored in a loving centeredness.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was the other day. Somebody had, how you get these emails, and somebody had a kind of a tagline at the end, a little quote, and it was a Tibetan saying, and it said, "Wherever you have received the most love, that is your home."
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of praying on it after I had read it, and I thought, well, I don't think that's right, actually. I mean, my home experience as a kid and growing up was magnificent. And clearly the place where I've received the most love is at Homeboy Industries. But, what happens when you move away from home? And that's kind of our challenge, because we have an 18-month program, and homies will say things like, Homeboy is more home than home, or they'll say, one said to me, "Hey, you know what my favorite part about Homeboy?" I said, "What?" He said, "The home part." And so I get it,
Well,
but
you've
it's
got
hard.
some stories about that too.
Yeah, but after 18 months, they leave us. Nobody wants to leave us because we're more home than home. But I think the thing that sets us up, if life is about receiving love, then you'll always be disappointed. It's never enough love. It's never enough people. And then you're always measuring, So my contention after reading that was, no, that's not where home is. Loving is home.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can move on, and you're resilient and sturdy, and you're never going to be homesick, because loving is home.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're kind of finding your true self and loving. So it doesn't matter where you go. You can go to a place where nobody receives you at all.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
that's a good segue into telling us specifically about the work of Homeboy Industries, and a little bit, you've kind of alluded a little to the theology that serves as the foundation for the ministry that you share. It's not just yours; it's the one you share with all of the folks who are there. Can you say something about that, and maybe talk a little bit about mercy and forgiveness and some of the other themes that fit into the work that happens there?
Yeah, well, so we've been around for 35 years, and I suppose initially, gang members kept saying, if only we had jobs. And so, so we tried to find felony-friendly employers. And so we did, and sometimes not so much. And then we started our own, social enterprises. But then it became clear that we needed to move from being job-centric to healing-centered, and that everyone who walks through our doors comes barricaded behind a wall of shame and disgrace. And the only thing that can scale that wall is tenderness. And so they all come with what psychologists would call a disorganized attachment. Mom was frightened or frightening, and you can't really calm yourself down if you've never been soothed. So if it's true that a traumatized person is going to be inclined to perhaps cause trauma, then it has to be true that a cherished person will be able to find their way to the joy there is in cherishing themselves and others. So, the whole place is kind of a therapeutic. We talk about therapeutic mysticism at Homeboy. Where, and it's not. I don't transform lives. but I think that transformation happens there. And so all hands on deck, therapy and case managers and navigators, and even the guys who are in charge of security, the homies, they're all doing sidewalk counseling, so it's the whole place. Whereas comparable programs might deliver services, we don't want to become the DMV,
Yeah.
And so delivery of services is really secondary to people knowing the truth of who they are, that they're exactly what God had in mind when God made them. So you watch them become that truth.
Mm-hmm.
The Buddhists would say, oh, nobly born, remember who you really are. Well, everybody at the place holds the mirror up and returns people to themselves. We're really allergic to the idea of holding the bar up and asking folks to measure up,
Right.
mainly because our God doesn't do any such thing. So that's what we do. So, it's 18 months. It's a paid gig. We have 13 what we call justice enterprises, bakery, lots of restaurants, electronic recycling, any number of things.
Can you tell us a story or two that stand out for you of transformation that you can speak about?
I have too many of them, and I've written 4 books on them. So,
Well, pick something.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I always don't. It always doesn't feel very organic. If you ask me a question, I can. I'll tell you a story. But just kind of transformational. I mean, the whole thing is. I have a million of them, and I don't know. Sometimes they're too long or involved, but anyway, I don't know. So you were talking about forgiveness. So I had a homie. My spiritual director is a gang member, and we email every morning, and we read the readings of the day, and we check in back and forth every day at like 4 a.m. And he was saying to me the other day, he goes, I don't know, I'm not a big fan of forgiveness. He said, see, because with forgiveness, it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. He goes, I don't know. I'm in favor of fourth. And I thought that was great. And he goes, fourth is mercy.
Mm-hmm.
And why would you settle for forgiveness when you could have mercy? So it's a little bit like, the thing about receiving love. There's no waiting when it comes to mercy. And so at Homeboy, you have guys who used to shoot at each other, making croissants together.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't work it out. They don't talk stuff out. So I'll tell, this is a story. I remember this guy, David, was standing next to Louis, and they hated each other. They used to shoot at each other, enemy gangs. And David had a bunch of tattoos on his face. And Louis was from 18th Street, and David was from Playboys. And so one of the many tattoos that David had was the number 18 tattooed on his face, which was the enemy gang. Only so he could cross them out, which is very provocative. And so there he's next to this guy who he hated, and they hated each other, and it was mutual, but they were making croissants. And they didn't talk, but they were there next to each other, shoulder to shoulder. And so on David's day off, he went into our tattoo clinic, and he said, take this one off. It's a long process. It's, might take 20 sessions, 6 weeks apart. So it's long. And so he came in the next day, and this tattoo was kind of puffy and red and raised. and he's making croissants with his enemy. And finally, he turns to him and he says, "I'm getting this off. It's because of you. You're good people." And they went back to making croissants. Now, does that always happen? Of course. Any exceptions? No. And it's kind of what mercy is about.
Yeah.
It's just forth.
I remember a story that you told in Tattoos of the Heart about riding along in the car, and the guy sitting next to you was getting a text message that was amusing. And I think there was an exchange, and you asked what it was about, and he said that, this was from Snoopy or somebody who was down at jail, and
Yeah. So yeah, we were going, Manuel and Poncho, older vatos. We were going to give a talk at a high school. Manuel is in the front seat. He gets a text, and he chuckles. I said, "What is it?" And he said, it was dumb. It was from Snoopy back at the office. I just seen Snoopy before we left to drive away. And Snoopy and Manuel run the clock-in room where they clock in hundreds and hundreds of gang members. And I said, "Well, what's he say?" And he goes, "Oh, it's dumb. Hang on. Hey, dog, they got my ass locked up at county jail. They're charging me with being the ugliest vato in America. You have to come down right now, show them they got the wrong guy." And I remember we died laughing, and I nearly drove into oncoming traffic. And then I realized that Manuel and Snoopy were enemies. They were rivals. They too used to shoot bullets at each other. I can't help but think and remember with great pain that the guy in the back seat, Poncho, died last week from a fentanyl overdose.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And he was much beloved at Homeboy. He was in and out of real mental anguish and mental health issues that he always sought to, quiet the voices with drug use. I have a lot of nicknames, and he always called me G-Love. And he's the only one who ever did that. Every text message began with G-Love. Or whenever I'd see him, I saw him the day he died, which was last week.
Mm.
And he came in and he said, "Hey, G-Love, help me, spend a week in a hotel." I said, "No, let's get you into detox right now," because he was clearly on a good one. And he said, yes. And I went to go get somebody to get him into detox, and he disappeared.
Mm.
And he was dead that night.
Mm. Well, may his memory be a blessing.
Yeah. He was a great one.
You have this.
And let me just do one little parenthesis.
Sure.
We went and gave that talk. And as we're driving, I said, don't romanticize gang life, because no kid is seeking anything when he joins a gang. He's always fleeing something.
Mm-hmm.
And no hopeful kid has ever joined a gang. And so we're in this gym, and Poncho got up, and big, huge guy, covered in tattoos, but very, very big guy. And he was telling his story, and then all of a sudden he kind of stopped, like he just blanked out. And I was about to go up on the stage and rescue him, but he was retrieving a memory, and he said, "I think I was 6, and I was playing with matches, and my mom dragged me into the kitchen, and we had one of those electrical coil stove tops, and she waited till it was red hot, and she pressed my hand down on it. Well, the whole gym filled with kids they just gasped. And then he said, all I can remember was I woke up on the bathroom floor and my hand was in the toilet water trying to get some relief because my hand was all pussy and red. They gasped again. And now he's crying. And he looks out at them as he's just sobbing and he says, that's why I joined a gang. Mm. And it was like he had retrieved this memory and excavated the wound. And yeah.
You talk about, you have a vision of what you describe as radical kinship and being the community that God would recognize. And you put it in the context of a circle. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I don't know exactly where. I think I say, we imagine a circle of compassion.
Yeah.
Then we imagine nobody standing outside that circle. And so we seek to dismantle the barriers that exclude. Mm-hmm. And that's God's dream come true. I mean, Jesus would say that you may be one. That's the hope. Mm-hmm. And, that to acknowledge that separation is an illusion. And how do we bridge the distance? Right. And that's the only thing God wants. I mean, you're not going to find anything in Scripture, really, in the New Testament, where, Jesus says the goal is to worship me. But it's, you'd think if that was something that mattered to him, he might have said it at the end of his life, but he didn't. He said that you may be one. That's it. That's the whole thing. So I find that kind of heartening.
Illumin men are committed to a process of spiritual deepening and transformation. And the work that we do individually and collectively is focused on three primary areas. One being healing, the second being spiritual growth and development, and then the third one is eldering. And and I sense that the work that you're doing and your people are doing in Homeboy Industries starts with healing and then deepening. And it's not, I sense that it's probably not in a particularly religious context, but there's a spiritual element to it. And then you're growing men and women into identifying and connecting with their true selves and then becoming elders. You're an elder. You have, I understand, some kind of a cancer. Is that correct?
Yeah, leukemia.
Yeah, and so talk a little bit about that whole process of healing, spiritual development, and eldering, and especially around the eldering piece for you as you deal with a really serious illness.
Well, I've never heard the verb eldering before.
Oh,
so
something new.
Yeah. So yeah, it is new. So elders are kind of a big deal among homies because there's a lot of native sensibilities, and a lot of native homies, who are connected to, kind of the tribal, especially ones in Los Angeles, Tongva, and a variety of others. So I just came back from South Dakota to the Indian reservation, Pine Ridge, and I had two homies with me, and they were, again, very much connected to the First Nations sensibility. So elders, it means a lot, you know. I feel more just like I'm older, not so much an elder, but oh well, we'll leave that there. But your first part was so healing,
Healing,
so
spiritual growth.
spirituality. Yeah, so I think that's kind of how we are, you know. I mean, like today, I was talking to a homie who's kind of helps run the place. And, you know, he went through the program himself. Now he's the vice president of something or other. I don't even know what his title is. But he's in recovery. And so he was talking to somebody who was kind of down, also in recovery. And he says, here, try this. Go pick up the phone, call somebody who you know is in the program, you know, not your sponsor, but be, you know, ask him how he's doing, how he's feeling. And anyway, the guy came back 15 minutes later and he said, I just feel like a big weight has been lifted. And again, it was what we were talking about earlier. You know, he was extensive. He was outside himself. And it moved him from self-absorption and sadness to real joy because he was, you know, a 15-minute check-in with somebody who, how you doing? And are you, you know, are you sober? And anyway, I mean, again, it's everybody is sort of an elder for each other. I suppose that's the evolution.
Yeah.
You know, where people come to terms with what was done to them, like with the ACEs, with the adverse childhood, you know, experiences, what kids are exposed to, what was done to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come to a sense of spirituality, I'm sure, where they're, you know, higher power and lots of other things. And you're right, at Homeboy, we're not really specifically religious because everybody's every shade and shape of, you know, religion and spirituality. So you tap into, you know, the great wealth of wisdom that spans every religious tradition.
Right.
And there's a kind of a whole lots of rituals at Homeboy that people are very much connected to.
Okay. Can you give us an example of something?
Well, that's mainly in the morning meeting where we gather every morning for 10 minutes and somebody reads the land acknowledgement and then somebody reads the mission statement. And then we sing happy birthday to the multiple people whose birthday it is. And then we have these little back and forth, like call and response things, you know, like I ran the meeting today. I do when I'm in town, which is kind of rare these days. But so I say tattoo removal. And then Marvin, who runs the clinic, says all day. And then everybody in unison, this is 500 people. They all say all damn day. We all say it at the same thing, you know, and they're just little things, you know, and after the mission statement, somebody reads the mission statement and then there's a pause and then someone will say, and that's, and everybody will say, what we do. Who knows? I don't know where any of this happened. We sing happy birthday and then whoever's leading, I'll say, and everybody in unison will say, we're glad you were born.
Oh, so wonderful.
So it's just a very odd thing. And, but it's kind of the Church of Homeboy. And these are our holy, holy, holies. And we just say them. And then we'll say, you know, any announcements from the floor. And it's just so breathtaking. People are, you know, I got my kids back, or someone will say something about someone else. I just want to congratulate, you know, Maria. She got her driver's license, you know, And it's just so beautiful.
That
And that
sounds
goes on, and sometimes quite tearfully for some time until everybody's, and then we have a thought for the day. Somebody has prepared something.
all of this in 10 minutes.
10, 15. And
Okay.
then
In
somebody,
person? Everybody's there in person?
yeah, some people are off site because we have these 13 justice enterprises. So, but they're on a big, huge TV screen.
I see.
And they're present by, watching.
I want to get to allow others to ask some questions, but I have two more for you. And September, we have a gathering of Illumin men from all over the United States, from Canada. Sometimes they come from Australia, sometimes they come from Europe and Latin America. And it's usually been up in Bernalillo, New Mexico, and Richard Rohr joins us. We have moved it this year to Orkney Springs, Virginia, up in the Allegheny Mountains, and the theme of that is reclaiming our hidden wholeness. And when you think of wholeness, and maybe identifying it, embracing it, reclaiming it, what does that mean to you? Just that idea?
Well, every holy person has been a healthy person. And every healthy person is a holy person. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there are any exceptions. Mm-hmm. It's how it works. So none of us are well until all of us are well. And so how do we walk each other into wholeness? And acknowledging that wholeness is kind of on a continuum. It's a spectrum of health and holiness. And it's never a kind of a thing that just goes like this and you become healthier, healthier, healthier. I mean, we all have moments, 2 steps forward, 5 steps backwards. And healing ends in the graveyard. But I think everything is about health, which is to say about wholeness. And so, there we have the trial in Pittsburgh of at the Tree of Life Synagogue. And you can name it for a lot of things, like anti-Semitism or hate crime. But it's really about health. Nobody healthy has ever done such a thing ever in the history of the world, period.
Yeah.
And so, but I think it matters how you name things. Mm-hmm. So, wholeness is kind of inhabiting your fullest to the, dignity and nobility, knowing that we need to walk each other home, to wholeness and wellness and health. But we get stuck because we think, oh, well, that's hate. I go, well, I don't know. Nobody healthy has ever hated, ever. And so I think it's helpful to name it properly, because once you say I'll give you an example. I was in a Chicago Midway airport. It's the tale of 2 T-shirts. And it was right after, I think, the aged Asian woman who was assaulted on the streets of San Francisco. I think it happened right around that time. Right. There was a young woman that had a T-shirt that said, "Love, not hate." And I remember seeing it, and I said, oh, that's why we don't make progress. So on the one hand, you would go, well, no, why aren't you, saying right on? Well, because it strikes a high moral distance. It says there are people who don't belong to us. And it says there are folks who are not unshakably good. And I don't agree with any of that.
Hmm.
And I think it's why we don't make progress. Well, in the same airport, I see a woman with a huge older woman with a T-shirt that just said in big block black capital letters, it said "unwell," and I said, "Yes, finally, progress." You know, and because I think that's what it's about. You don't have to have any kind of moral overlay at all.
Hmm.
You know, a guy today, who works for us had some kind of episode where he had a knife and didn't hurt anybody, but he brandished it and kind of went crazed. You know, this was not a hate crime. This was not a bad guy. This is clearly, all behavior is a language. What language is that speaking? There's the thorn underneath, which is what the homies always talk about. So I don't know. I think wholeness is about wellness and it's about holiness. And we're on a path, and that's where home is. And how do we help each other do this? But the two operative principles at Homeboy are everyone's unshakably good, no exceptions, and we belong to each other.
So
No
where?
exceptions.
So
And
where? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said that recently at a LA Times Festival of Books. I was on a panel with a rabbi and a columnist from LA Times, and I said that. And then I looked at the audience, it was packed. And I said, do I think that all our problems and all the things we face and all the complex social dilemma would disappear if we believed those two things? And then I said, yes, I do. And the entire auditorium erupted in laughter. And when the laughter subsided, I said, yes, I do. And I do.
Where does evil fit into all that for you?
I really don't believe in it. I mean, I don't really. And working with gang members have taught me that. First of all, have I ever met an evil person? Well, of course not. Never. I've met damaged people, traumatized people, mentally ill people, despondent people, broken people, wounded people, but I've never met an evil person. I don't believe in evil. I believe in terrible. You know, I think the killings at the Tree of Life Synagogue was terrible. But clearly it was perpetrated by somebody who belongs to us and was not well. Now, if we believed that, we'd reach back and we'd say, he belongs to us. He's unshakably good. Oh my God, he's writing these things on the web, on the internet, and he's posting these things. And we go to him and we say, how could we help you not feel so much anguish?
Yeah.
He's not evil. He's clearly mentally ill.
Yeah.
Because
I have
nobody.
one last question before.
Yeah.
I have one last question before I open the floor. How are you preparing yourself and your community for the time when you're no longer able to lead it? And do you have a succession plan?
Yeah, I mean it's already been passed on. I mean, I don't run it.
Okay.
I have a CEO, I have a COO, a CFO. I have several vice presidents who are all homies. So I don't run anything. So, I'm the founder and I still hang around. But so that moment has already happened. I'd say 10 years ago, it was more of a burning question. But it's not so much for people who are close to the ground and see that it runs without me
I
already.
have to close with that comment, but thank you. And I'm going to ask you, if you would, Father, to offer a blessing, but I'd like to do a preface, if I may. Life is short, and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who travel with us. So be swift to love. Make haste to be kind, and go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Would you offer a blessing for us as farewell?
Sure. So may the God who loves us without measure and without regret uh, anchor every single one of you in gratitude, knowing that we all are born and we all will die, and all we have left is the tender time in between. May the God of life and love remind you that the highest form of spiritual maturity is tenderness, and that we might embrace that task and that gift and grace with all our hearts, and make this prayer and this blessing in God's holy name.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.